Ruth Hunt.
Very
Good
nice
to see you. Thank you very much indeed for inviting us along to your rather swanky offices
Thanks
in
for
edgy
coming.
Clerkenwell,
Edgy
or Farringdon.
Clerkenwell.
What's it like to be gay in 21st century Britain?
Well, it's very different from when it was in the early 90s when I came out at 13 at school. I think we've seen remarkable progress over the last 20 years, particularly between kind of 2008 and 2018 was quite a big milestone in terms of shifting attitudes. So we saw rapid legal change throughout the late 90s, early thousands, and now really we're starting to see that change attitudes. Still lots to be done, but it is remarkably a different place to be gay now.
Are there any particular politicians that you tip your cap to during that decade?
Well, in the beginning, it was people like Lord Chris Smith, Angela Regal, really kind of pushing the door. So there were a lot of very brave individuals who stood up and said, I know this isn't popular, I know you're going to be rude to me about it, but I've got to take a stand. Ben Bradshaw was talking yesterday about how he used to be described as a deviant homosexual who was likely to hurt the children in his constituency. Do you know what I mean? So that it took a lot of courage in those days. And I think what's really inspiring now is that we see lesbian, gay and bisexual politicians across the benches. You know, you look at the Conservative Party, you've got Justine Greening, you've got Ruth Davidson, Margot James, three incredible women, all open about their sexuality on those Conservative benches and in the Conservative Party.
But I'm guessing it's not just politicians who are LGBT who support the cause. I'm godmother to two little girls whose parents are lesbian, and they look to David Cameron for gay marriage and him changing the law. I think it was him that changed the laws.
It was him who did the marriage.
And although they're Labour supporters, they felt that he had done his bit. So it's not just LGBT politicians who support you.
Back in those early days, when it wasn't very popular, so in those early 90s, it was the Lamboses. Now, the fact that we have such huge cross-bench support and support from heterosexual people in general has been the real game changer. You know, people like my mum doing her best in her sphere, all the way up to David Cameron doing his best in his sphere. It's people really making a difference. And we work with 750 employers, and the drivers there really are heterosexual people going, hold on a minute, this is the right thing to do on lots of different levels.
I'm just looking, you recently did a survey, didn't you, about business being more welcoming, and as a company, Sky, very proud to be the top performing media company.
Sky's doing really well, and there's a misconception that media companies are really good for LGBT people, but some of your competitors, let's say, struggle more with this than others. Channel 4 are just kind of trying to catch up with Sky, but Sky have really put the effort in over the last couple of years, particularly around our Rainbow Laces campaign, and supporting us with the sport work has been really exciting to do.
Tell us about Rainbow Laces.
So Rainbow Laces is a campaign we've been running for a couple of years now. We do it in partnership with the Premier League, where we work with Premier League in September, but all sports in all different ways to basically tackle homophobia in sport. So to basically say,
how prevalent is it?
It's really quite prevalent in football. What we see in football, there's of course no openly gay players in the Premier League at all, but a lot of the chants on the terraces we found has been quite prolific. So homophobic chants, banter, just general kind of culture is a real problem. In other sports, what we see is that there's a reticence to really celebrate that you might have gay people playing in your team. And what sport is struggling with is to realise that if someone's not out, that has an impact on their performance. So if someone's keeping a secret, they're holding back a bit. So from a sports psychology point of view, making sure people are able to be themselves is a really important thing. It's what business worked out a decade ago. You know, EYs, IBMs, Accenture, they don't do the gay stuff because it's a nice thing to do. They do it because it makes good business sense. I'm sure on some level they like it, but it makes good business sense. Sport hasn't made that click yet.
Is FIFA doing enough? I mean, it's interesting that the World Cup is in Russia, and we know what Russia's view is as far as gay relationships are concerned, let alone LGBT, how they would feel about transgender.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing. They're doing some things, but we would like them to do more. I mean, I think that we would love to see that some of the considerations about how human rights defenders are treated in a country are brought into play when these decisions are made about where we host World Cups. Saying that, the activists in Russia are really pleased that the world's focus is now on Russia. I think what their concern is that when the cameras all go home and the folks go home, who's left watching them? And Stonewall does a huge amount of work with human rights defenders in Russia, training them, taking the 29 years of stuff we've accumulated and saying, don't bother with that, it didn't work very well, but that worked quite well. And I think that their concern is that this focus is important, but it needs to be kept on the country.
Are they fearful?
Yes. Yes, of course.
With justification?
Yeah. I mean, I think the crackdown on civil society organisations in Russia is pretty extraordinary. And I think that people presume that hostility towards LGBT people kind of manifests itself in beating people up, and there are elements of that. But when you take away money, when you take away spaces to meet, when you stop people meeting, when you stop people collecting, stop people writing literature, performing plays, all that is an erosion of self and is a really insidious indication of where a nation's at.
Were England right to take part?
Yes, of course. And I don't think anyone would suggest that England shouldn't go. I think what's important, though, is England understand what role they have to play in changing the culture here. So when those players go back to their teams, how can they be championing the end to homophobia in sport more generally? And I think there is an increasing awareness. We're quite impressed by the pace with which sport has embraced the campaign over the last couple of years.
And going back to politicians, they have as well this new strategy that's been announced this week, banning conversion therapy. What is that?
So lots of people talk about conversion therapy and mean lots of different things. So
what does it mean to you?
So there's conversion therapy where therapists might say, you think you're gay but you're not, and I'm going to talk you out of being gay. That doesn't happen as much anymore, though it does still happen. And the regulatory bodies that govern psychotherapy are very strict about that. What we're more concerned about are the informal conversions that are going on behind closed doors, in communities, in the name of God sometimes, or just in the name of any deity they want to pluck from the air. It's about trying to shame people and tell them that they're not who they think they are. And the impact and the cruelty on an individual's mental health and well-being is beyond the pale. And I know that there are some very upsetting stories out there from people who've experienced such things. People like Vicky Beeching, who's been talking a lot this week about her experiences. And I think there's something very, very dark about some of the ways in which young LGBT people are being treated by their communities that needs attention.
A Northern Ireland-based group, you've probably heard about this, that counsels gay people, says it will take legal advice if the government bans conversion therapy. They say you can't force people to be gay just because they have the feelings. What would you say to that?
Well, I think this is what I mean by lots of people mean different things about conversion therapy. We would fully expect and welcome LGBT people going to speak to good therapists about their feelings, about their sexual orientation and gender identity. I mean, if only there was more facilities available on the NHS for people to do that. And of course, people will go and talk about their ambivalent feelings about that and work it through. And some might conclude they're LGBT, some might not. That's very different to, I'm gay, please cure me. Please stop me being gay, and help me stop being gay by some pretty barbaric practices. So I think it is about understanding that differentiation.
What happens?
Well, kind of prayers over people, making them kind of stay up all night to beat the demons out of them, you know, kind of just really horrific stuff that is very different to, let's talk about how you might feel. I mean, you know, there's a very different quality. And I think that people get over anxious about people's capacity to have a good conversation is great. People being beaten up and told they're beating the gay out of them and calling it conversion therapy is not acceptable.
It certainly is not. While we're with Northern Ireland, let's just stay there for a moment, should we? The decision to provide pardons for past convictions for gay men. It's the latest step, but still a long way to go in places like Northern Ireland and, of course, Ireland itself.
Well, Ireland's pretty good, actually. Ireland's further ahead than us these days.
It is.
They're the creme de la creme.
You go that far?
Yeah, no, they really, them and Malta, Ireland and Malta are the best countries in the world. I know, it just goes to show.
Strong Catholic countries.
Yes, strong Catholic countries, exactly. It's really interesting that both Malta and Ireland have said, look, enough is enough, we're going to really pursue this. So Ireland have got, of course they did marriage, but they've also got much better legislation in relation to trans equality, for example. They're much further ahead. Northern Ireland is struggling, and they're struggling with marriage. And they have a majority, and I think they even have 2/3 majority now, but they keep being defeated by what's called this conscience clause, this veto. And I think the question for the activists in Northern Ireland is, what role can Westminster play in helping that? And I think Stonewall's very aware that the last thing that we should do is rock up and go, don't worry, the Brits are here, we'll sort all this out for you. I mean, that's not the right way of doing it. But I think that we have a really good opportunity in partnership with the DUP that we currently hold to try and do some influencing around that. And I think that I know that the people of Northern Ireland are very, very keen for this to move forward. we work with employers in Northern Ireland, and they know that if they are training young people in the universities in Belfast, if they then leave and come to London, they've got a serious recruitment problem. And of course, it's not just LGBT people who say, I don't want to live here, that, you know, Ireland's better, London's better, why would I want to live here? It's their straight friends as well, who think, hold on a minute, you know. So there's a real issue about retaining the talent in country, and marriage is such a big litmus test, really, for how a country stands on all sorts of other issues. As we saw in Australia last year, you kind of can take a temperature quite well on how a country feels about gay people getting married.
75-point government strategy. It sounds very thorough. Where have they fallen short?
Do you know they haven't? We've been talking to them for a long time. 100,000 survey response gives them a really good evidence base. We've said to them, look, these are the things that are missing. These are the really urgent things. These are the things we'd like to have. These things are a bit more tricky, and they've gone, okay. So even looking at things like surrogacy, which we thought wouldn't come up this Parliament, to be frank, you know, Conservative minority government, do you want to be getting into the issue of surrogacy? They've said, yeah, bring it on. So we're impressed. How much they can achieve of the 75 points in 3 years with 4.5 million is, thank heavens,
I'm not
the economist.
Nowhere near enough
money.
Well,
you know, it's a time of austerity and money is short. Stonewall's very good at doing a lot on a little budget, so I'm sure we can give them some tips. And a lot of it is about just changing the narrative.
Hate crime action plan. I don't know if I live in a London bubble. When I was little, I lived in the northwest. I don't know if I had forward-thinking parents, but I've never really particularly been aware of hate crime against transgender or gay or lesbian people. That just, I'm not saying it's not there. Yeah. What I'm saying is, has it got better?
It feels like it hasn't. I think that all our evidence, and it's a bit of a blow to Stonewall because it's our job to make this better, but all our evidence every 5 years shows that hate crime isn't going down or changing. What's interesting...
Is it against gay people, or is it lesbians, gays, or is it more transgender that's the issue now?
Both. So trans is much, much higher. So I think it's about 50% of trans people have experienced hate crime, so that's higher than LGB. And we split it up because we're very aware that trans people are having a very different time in terms of hate crime. So our own trans staff can't walk down the street without someone heckling them and having a go at them. Just anecdotally here, we know that more and more of our staff are experiencing hate crime. Some of our staff were at a festival the other week, were leaving, and a group of youth started throwing rocks at him and his friends. You know, these are young gay men.
How should they deal with that?
They should go to the police, and I think that what
easily said though, isn't it? I mean, you know, if you're coming out of a festival and somebody's lobbing rocks at you, what do you do?
Well, I think what most LGBT people do these days is the first thing they do is go on social media. So what's interesting is that these stories are being told in a different way. I know that what I do when I get called a dyke on the street and, you know, get out of it, I've found that even in London I've been getting more stuff in the last year.
Why?
I don't know. I think there's something a bit more edgy going on at the moment. I think a lot of the speculation...
Is that because people have been enabled because of Brexit, or nothing to do with Brexit?
I don't know. I think that people are angry, and people are taking that out in all sorts of different ways. I think that the speculation about gender and gender identity is fueling some of that. So me and my partner have both been asked to leave bathrooms more in the last year than we ever have. So, you know,
what do you say?
You're in the wrong toilet, love. Well, we're very good-humoured about it, and we kind of say, no, we're right. So we kind of be quite gentle about it, but the hostility is quite apparent, and I think that what we're seeing is people feel more enabled to say stuff they might have ordinarily bitten their tongue about. And I think that's a bit to do with social media, because when it's all going on social media, and Kay, you'll know better than me quite how personal and vitriolic it can get on social media, how quickly that can spill over into real life. It doesn't take much. If someone's been emboldened and has the confidence to say X, Y and Z to me online, it doesn't take much for them to say it to me when they see me on the street.
And you, like me, probably embrace that with good humour and give as good as we get. But there are a lot of people who are not as strong characters as we are.
And it leaves a mark. So even if you decide to be quite resilient about it and say, well, it's this and it's that and it's just this person and it doesn't really matter, it will always leave a mark. Even if you're turning that into something good, that leaves a mark. And of course, there are people out there whose resilience is already eroded. If you're someone trans who's been, you know, heckled on the street, shouted at on the bus, your mum doesn't like you, your dad tells you that you're not who you think you are and you're a freak, then you get online and someone has a go at you, that can be the last thing. And I think we've got to be really aware as a society about how all this stuff accumulates, and kind of really, not just in relation to LGBT stuff, I think the way some women are treated online, the way black people are treated online, that there is something, that there's a cruelty to it that is different, I think, than what we've seen in the last few years.
How difficult is it to come out?
Really difficult. I think what most young people do is they realise they're LGB in particular and T, and then wait. And they wait for about 2 to 3 years. And in those 2 to 3 years, they wait for every verbal cue to find out how things are going to be. Is their mum going to be all right about it? Or did she call Anthony Cotton on Coronation Street an old poofter? You know, every little thing like that becomes a data gathering exercise, and you're assessing all the time, how is this going to be? And what you risk is you risk losing your family. So they have an expectation of how you're going to be. They have an anxiety that if you're different, what that's going to mean for you. They are worried about stigma. They're worried about, it all might come from a good place of love, but the individual has to risk losing their support for that. And that's changing because parents are learning to say, I don't mind if you're gay, by the way, you know, and your Uncle John's gay and isn't he great? And I've got loads of godchildren, you know, they all grow up with Auntie Ruthie and Auntie Caroline, who brings them really cool Lego and Liberty clothes, do you know what I mean? So there's a kind of, the world is changing, but then anxiety is still very prevalent, particularly in young people. We meet people who don't come out until they're 22, 23, when they've left university, have a job, are secure, then they feel safe to come out. And I still work with people in their 50s and 60s.
I was going to ask you about that, the fact that people have chosen one path, like Kelly Maloney, lots of other people as well, and then at some stage in the future realise that actually they wish they'd gone a different way. Some people do, other people don't. Those that feel that they can't, what would you say to them?
I think that people have to do what's right for them in the pace that's right for them. But I think that you cannot underestimate the impact it has on your well-being to have a secret. I think privacy is one thing, but keeping a secret it can be toxic for some people, and find someone to talk to about it. It doesn't mean you have to smash
Easily
everything.
said though, isn't
It
it?
is.
Who do you talk to?
Well, there are some increasingly good resources out there. LGBT Switchboard is fantastic. You know, they're always there, confidential conversation. The Samaritans are really good at LGBT stuff these days. Sometimes GPs can be good as well, and there are specialist service. Pink Therapy has a list of pink therapists, but it is about finding out the impact it's having on you about not being yourself, and realising you can kind of think about those issues and then decide what you're going to do about it. It's people who say, I'm going to pretend this isn't happening, who are the most harmed. And that's what always concerns us. It's never about everybody coming out and getting excited. It's about doing what's right for you, but recognising the impact if you don't.
Pride, what does pride mean to you? Because obviously it's a bit controversial that at the moment, isn't it, as far as your organisation is concerned? Go on, tell me about it.
It's a bit controversial, but not overly controversial in Stonewall standards. I mean, there are 140 prides in Britain this year alone, and every little pride is amazing. You go, there are kids there who have never been out before, are buying their gay t-shirt for the first time. Usually their mum and dad have come with them on their little parade. You know, it's really inspiring. So Stonewall is increasingly be doing more and more local prides anyway. So we're doing 33 this year. For the last 8 years, we've done a lot with something called UK Black Pride, which is an event that's just targeted at Black, Asian and minority ethnic LGBT people, and it's incredible. You know, as a community who are missed out of a lot of the communications about gay issues, not reflected on television, this event is really powerful, something special. You should come along, Kay, it's really, really special. Pride in London used to work in partnership with them, and I think that we really wanted to help Pride in London have a better working relationship with UK Black Pride, but that didn't quite come off. So this year,
did that mean you needed to pull out of?
Well, I think we just made the decision that this year wasn't the best use of our time or priorities or resources.
Couldn't you do both?
We could. We've done it in the past, but I think that when the independent advisory board said, look, Pride in London, you've got some problems, and Pride in London said, no, we've not, I think our staff and our board felt, well, all right, you have a year to think about it, we'll do some other things, and let's kind of take it again another time.
As you know, people like the European Pride are looking for a public apology from you,
yes,
personally.
Yes.
Would you like to give them one?
I think that what they're concerned about is the fact that Stonewall raises money, and Stonewall has raised money for the last 29 years. We're very
about
lucky.
Your Primark deal, I
Primark
think.
deal, yeah. And we've had deals with lots of different organisations. So year before last, we were partnering with Adidas. Year before that, Adidas. In Primark,
I think
we
Primark
particularly
is the issue because of what's
Well,
being created, where it's being created, and they feel that the funds should go to China, to Turkey, to Myanmar, as opposed to.
No, I think they want the funds to go to them.
Okay.
Just no. So that's what they want the apology on. I think that what we decided to work with Primark precisely because they work in those areas. So we have a global program where we work with employers to influence cultures locally. Because if Primark creates an environment in Turkey where LGBT people are able to be themselves, that's quite transformative. You know, there's lots of ways to achieve change. We are thrilled that they want to give us some proceeds from their sale of Pride t-shirts. Last year they didn't give that money to any charity at all. This year they chose us over local prides. And I think Stonewall always has to make a decision about who we take money from, why, and what the conditions are around that. And I think that for us, Primark are in a really good position to influence. And they want to support our work internationally. We train activists in these countries to make change. For us to be able to introduce those activists to people in Primark is a really strong outcome. Some people will disagree with that. I am more than familiar with people sometimes disagreeing with the decisions that Stonewall make, but we make these decisions well, and that's how we work. We rarely take government money. We've never taken government money for core activity, mainly because it was never on offer, so it became quite an easy principle for us to adopt. I slightly regret that now, Kay, if I'm honest, because it'd be quite nice to take some government money. Okay. Yeah. But so we take it for projects, but we don't take it for core costs. So we raise money through lots of different forms, and people will disagree with that sometimes.
What one message would you like heterosexual people to take away from this interview?
I think that it would be great if heterosexual people can recognise the power they have to change culture. So when the person next to you says, oh my God, that computer's so gay, just tell them they sound a bit of an idiot. Because that kid is listening to those cues as to whether they can tell you they're LGBT or not. It doesn't take much to change a culture at all.
Lovely to meet you.
And you,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.